Everyone told me it couldn't happen, that after 40 years walking property lines, I'd seen every scam in the book. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the sight of 98 brand new houses standing where my cattle had grazed just a month before. The first clue was the sound. Not the low, contented moo of my Angus herd or the wind whispering through oak leaves, but the hum of lawnmowers, the shriek of kids playing tag, and the rhythmic thunk-thunk of basketballs bouncing on fresh asphalt. It didn't belong here. On the back 40 acres my grandfather had worked his whole life to protect. I'd just come back from Oregon, helping my daughter through a messy divorce. 3 weeks away from home, I'd been longing for the quiet, my coffee at sunrise, my boots crunching gravel along the fence line, maybe fixing a post or two before the Tennessee heat settled in. That's retirement. That's peace. But the moment I stepped out of my truck, peace was gone. The air smelled wrong. No sweet honeysuckle, no creek water, just hot asphalt, sawdust, and the faint chemical bite of fresh paint. I grabbed my surveying kit, habit more than anything, and walked toward the noise. Halfway across the pasture, I saw it. A decorative stone arch, carved in script fancier than a wedding invitation. Heritage Meadows Estates. Manicured lawns, moving trucks, golden retrievers chasing tennis balls. Every last inch of it standing on my land. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd taken a wrong turn, that somehow, after 40 years, I'd gotten lost on my own property. But then I saw my grandfather's oak tree, the one where I'd carved my late wife Martha's initials the summer before we married. Willow Creek still ran along the bottom edge of the field, the same place I learned to fish as a boy. No. This was my land. Someone had just decided they owned it. That's when I heard the whir of a golf cart. And there she was, Victoria Ashworth. Vicky, as she likes to be called. 52 years old, perfectly styled blonde hair, HOA badge clipped to her linen blouse like it was a sheriff's star. She had the smile of a woman who'd never had to hear the word no, and a voice that could sweet-talk a snake right out of its skin. "Excuse me, sir," she said in that syrupy, fake polite tone. "This is private property. Heritage Meadows is a gated community for residents and invited guests only." I just stared at her. My boots were planted in dirt my family had owned since 1924, and this woman was telling me I was trespassing. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice steady, "there's been some mistake. This is my property. Always has been." She laughed, short, sharp, and cold. "Oh, honey, I'm afraid you're confused. We purchased this land legally 2 years ago from Meadowbrook Development Corporation. Perhaps you've made a surveying error." She held a folder thick enough to choke a horse, flipping through pages like she'd done it 100 times before. But when I asked to see them, she clutched that thing like it was a bag of gold and I was a highway robber. "Not required to share private HOA documents with trespassers," she said with a smug little tilt of her head. "But I'm feeling generous today. I'm sure we can work out some arrangement that doesn't disrupt these families." That's when I knew it wasn't a mistake. It was a con. 3 days later, Deputy Mike Ashworth, her cousin, was on my porch with a restraining order. Claimed I'd threatened residents with my surveying equipment. Apparently carrying a measuring tape now counted as brandishing a weapon. The order barred me from stepping foot on my own back 40 acres. Then the campaign began. Letters to every Heritage Meadows resident warning them about the unstable former landowner. Social media posts comparing my weathered farmhouse to their pristine subdivision. Lowering property values, she claimed. HOA volunteers patrolling the fence line with cameras, photographing me like I was a dangerous animal. Thing is, I've been in the land business long enough to know. Paper doesn't lie. People do. So I went to the courthouse and started digging. Took about 10 minutes to find the first crack. A $50 filing fee for a property transfer worth millions didn't add up. And the notary stamp belonged to sweet old Eleanor Hutchkins, who'd been dead 6 months before the papers were signed. Someone had forged the whole thing. I called my old friend Clarence Bulldog McKenzie, the best surveyor in 3 counties. He spent 2 days with his GPS equipment walking every inch of my boundaries. "Zeke," he said, spitting tobacco juice into the grass, "this whole subdivision is sitting on your land like fleas on a hound dog." Now I had proof. But proof doesn't stop people like Vicky. No, it just makes them meaner. The first shot she fired after that wasn't in a courtroom. It was in the shadows. One morning, I found nails scattered across my driveway. Not the kind that fall from a work truck by accident. These were placed sharp ends up, just waiting to puncture my tires. That night, I got an anonymous phone call. A low voice, calm and deliberate. Accidents happen to stubborn old men. Always at night. Always when no one's watching. Then the line went dead. Vicky wanted me rattled. And I'll admit, it worked. Next came the cameras. Tiny black eyes hidden in the oak trees along my fence line, their wires snaking back toward Heritage Meadows. Whoever installed them had spliced into my power meter, stealing my electricity to run their surveillance. The acid smell of fresh-cut plastic still clung to the bark. I sat in Martha's old garden that evening, the scent of her climbing roses mixing with the metallic taste of anger. I thought about selling, about taking whatever they offered and leaving this fight to someone younger. But then I remembered something my grandfather told me after the railroad tried to take our mineral rights. When someone steals your land, they're not just taking dirt, they're taking your family's history, and I wasn't about to hand over my history. Then the media came. Channel 7. News rolled into Heritage Meadows like they were covering a presidential assassination. Satellite. Trucks, camera crews, reporters in tailored suits. The story? Elderly man's delusions threaten young families. They showed slow-motion footage of children riding bikes past white picket fences, mothers clutching toddlers like I was the boogeyman. Vicky sat there in front of her HOA clubhouse, dabbing at eyes that didn't look the least bit wet. "It breaks my heart," she said, voice trembling just enough for the camera. "But we can't let one man's mental decline endanger our children." I watched the segment from my kitchen table, my hands curling into fists. They'd turned me into a villain in my own story. But while Vicky was performing for the cameras, I was following paper trails. That's when I found it. Something that made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. My property insurance had been canceled. The letter claimed there'd been a significant change in land usage, complete with aerial photos of Heritage Meadows. I knew exactly how that had happened. See, Vicky worked part-time for Mutual Trust Insurance. She'd used her access to sabotage my policy, leaving me uncovered just before making her next move. And her next move came fast. Judge Harold Peaton, who happened to golf with her husband Brad every Thursday, scheduled an emergency hearing. My court-appointed attorney smelled like bourbon and mispronounced my name twice before advising me to accept reality. Reality, in this case, meant giving up my land. They thought they could grind me down with delay tactics, hoping I'd die of old age before a trial. But I'd played this game before, and I had allies they didn't see coming. The first was a reporter named Ruby Morgan. She'd just moved here from Nashville, burned out on big city politics, and she'd watched Channel 7's hit piece on me with suspicion. "Mr. Thornfield," she said when she showed up at my gate, notebook in hand, "I've seen a lot of scams dressed up as community improvement. Mind if I look at your paperwork?" For 3 days, Ruby pored over county records, mortgage filings, even old marketing brochures. She found development plans dated 2 years before the supposed land purchase. She dug up Brad's sealed juvenile record in Kentucky, real estate fraud, of all things. And then she found the bombshell. Heritage Meadows had been built over federally protected wetlands. I'll never forget the look in her eyes when she told me, "This isn't just a property dispute anymore. It's a federal case." It was the kind of shift that changes everything, because wetlands mean EPA oversight. And EPA oversight means federal jurisdiction that no local judge, no good old boy sheriff, and certainly no HOA queen can manipulate. That night, I stood at the edge of Willow Creek, watching the water run dark from construction. Runoff. The frogs were gone. The air smelled faintly of chemicals. And I thought about the salamanders my grandson used to catch here in summer. Gone now, just like the quiet. Vicky thought she was playing a chess game. But what she didn't realize was that the board had just changed. Ruby didn't just hand me the wetlands revelation and walk away. She treated it like a match dropped in dry grass. "We've got to build the fire before they even realize the smoke," she said, spreading documents across my kitchen table like a general planning an invasion. "We'll need environmental experts, federal contacts, and airtight proof. Once this goes public, they'll try to bury it under a mountain of legal paperwork." I'd fought boundary disputes for decades, but this wasn't a dispute anymore. This was a war. Our first ally was Dr. Sarah Lightfoot, an EPA wetlands specialist with the kind of calm, precise voice that made you pay attention. Ruby sent her copies of the environmental survey, Brad's falsified one and the real one from a whistleblower named Danny Kowalski, the construction foreman who'd walked off the job when he saw what they were doing. Danny looked like a man who'd been living under a shadow for too long. His hands shook as he set photos on the table, images of concrete being dumped into marshland, rare plants bulldozed, salamander breeding pools filled in. "Brad told us it was just swamp," Danny said, voice low. "But the truth is, we were destroying protected habitat. I couldn't keep my crew there." The photos alone could have sunk the HOA, but Ruby wanted a kill shot, not a flesh wound. Meanwhile, Vicky escalated. She created a Heritage Meadows Safety Committee with patrols circling my fence line in golf carts, radios crackling like they were guarding a military base. Anonymous notes showed up in my mailbox. One read, "You can't win. Take the money and leave." My cattle started acting sick. The vet traced it to contaminated water, runoff from the subdivision's storm drains. That meant the toxins weren't just killing my land, they were seeping into the county's water table. Ruby's eyes lit up at that. "Zeke, this isn't just your fight anymore, it's everyone's." So we started documenting everything. Trail. Cameras hidden on my side of the property caught HOA patrols trespassing, photographing me from a few feet away. We recorded every phone call, every threat, every HOA meeting where Vicky used my name like a curse word. But the most powerful weapon was still in the courthouse basement. 3 weeks into Ruby's investigation, she called me at 6 a.m, her voice buzzing with adrenaline. "Get down here, now! You need to see this." I drove through fog thick enough to eat, the kind that muffles sound and makes your headlights look like ghost lanterns. Ruby met me at the back door, hair pulled into a messy knot, clutching a stack of coffee-stained envelopes. "In the railway? Archives," she said, leading me down creaking wooden stairs, buried under easement records from the 20s. The smell down there was a mix of dust and old paper, the scent of history. Ruby spread the envelopes across a scarred wooden table. Inside were my grandfather's original 1924 railroad contracts. The language was stunning in its simplicity. Any unauthorized structures built on Thornfield land would automatically transfer ownership to the Thornfield family. Not just the dirt, every improvement, fixture, and blade of grass. Ruby tapped the clause with one finger. "Zeke, this isn't state law. This is federal transportation law. They can't touch it. Not the HOA, not the county, not even the state." I felt the breath leave my lungs. My grandfather had written this nearly a century ago, never knowing it would save his grandson's land. Or maybe he had known. Maybe that was the kind of foresight people like him carried naturally. It meant one thing. Heritage Meadows wasn't just on my property. They were mine. Every house, every manicured lawn, every streetlight, even their precious HOA clubhouse. Ruby smiled like she'd just seen a checkmate 3 moves ahead. "They think they're building their legacy on stolen land. But Zeke, they've been building yours." For the first time since I'd seen those houses, I felt something stronger than anger. I felt control. Once you know the board is yours, the game changes. For weeks, I'd been reacting to Vicky's moves, countering lies, dodging harassment, patching the damage she caused. But the 1924 contract turned everything on its head. Now it was my turn to set the pace. Ruby and I cleared off her kitchen table and turned it into a war room. Maps, property plats, environmental reports, banking records, everything laid out in neat, dangerous piles. She called it organized chaos. I called it justice in progress. First, we brought in Marcus Webb, a federal prosecutor with 40 years of putting white-collar crooks in prison. Marcus read the contract twice, his glasses slipping down his nose, then leaned back in his chair. "Zeke," he said. "This is tighter than bark on a tree. I've prosecuted 12 easement cases. Yours is the cleanest I've ever seen. You don't need to prove ownership. The contract does it for you. All we have to do is enforce it." Second, we enlisted Dr. Sarah Lightfoot from the EPA to expand her investigation. She didn't just find wetlands violations, she found endangered species habitat destruction. Daily fines of $25,000 for every day heritage meadows had existed. By her math, the penalties could bankrupt not just the HOA, but everyone tied to it. Danny Kowalski brought the construction side of the story. His blueprints revealed houses built on wooden platforms over swampland, electrical systems that violated fire codes so badly one spark could have turned the subdivision into a suburban bonfire. And then there was Patty Goldman, our forensic accountant. She traced the funding through more shell companies than a 3-card Monte table. Some registered overseas, others connected to Brad Ashworth's old business associates. "This isn't just a land grab," Patty said. "It's money laundering. Big money laundering. The beauty of it was this. Each expert's findings strengthened the others. Property fraud tied to environmental crimes. Environmental crimes tied to construction fraud. Construction fraud tied to financial crimes. Every thread we pulled brought the whole tapestry closer to tearing. But Vicky wasn't sitting idle. She doubled down on her propaganda campaign, holding HOA meetings where she claimed I planned to bulldoze houses just to watch children cry. She called my grown kids in Oregon and Georgia, telling them I was in mental decline and that they should consider guardianship to protect the family assets. She even tried bribing my doctor, $20,000 for a dementia diagnosis. The man recorded the entire conversation and handed it over to Marcus, who smiled like a cat being served a fresh bowl of cream. Still, I knew the court of public opinion mattered, and Vicky had been winning it, so we picked a date. Festival Day. Vicky had planned it as a public victory lap, a Heritage Meadows family festival, with barbecue, bounce houses, and a city council annexation vote that would cement her control. We decided to make it her downfall. Ruby coordinated the timing like a military operation. At 11 a.m., the EPA would begin on-site inspections. At 1 p.m., U.S. Marshals would serve arrest warrants. By 2 p.m., Ruby's full investigative report, complete with documents, photos, and video evidence, would go live online. My job was to play the part of the old man beaten into submission. I'd meet Vicky on stage, accept her generous settlement offer, and smile for the cameras. Meanwhile, the federal wolves would be circling. The night before the festival, I drove out to Martha's grave. The honeysuckle she loved had grown thick around the headstone, its scent soft and sweet in the cooling air. "You were right," I told her, brushing leaves off her name. "It's not just about the land. It's about stopping them before they hurt more families." As the sun set, painting the sky in gold and violet, I felt calm. Not because I knew I'd win. Nothing in life is guaranteed. But because, for the first time in months, I knew I was walking into their territory on my terms. Vicky thought she'd built a kingdom. Tomorrow, she was going to find out it was mine all along. Festival morning arrived bright and hot, the kind of Tennessee summer day where the air feels like warm syrup and tempers snap like dry twigs. From a distance, Heritage Meadows looked like something out of a postcard, red, white, and blue bunting. Draped over street signs, kids in face paint chasing balloons, the smell of barbecue and funnel cakes drifting over the hills. But to me, it looked like a stage. Vicky had dressed the part. White sundress, pearl necklace, hair sprayed into submission. She moved through the crowd like a queen greeting her subjects, shaking hands, posing for photos with city council members, and pretending not to see me standing near the edge of the festival grounds. At 10:45, I spotted Ruby near the gazebo, wearing sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat. To the untrained eye, she looked like any other festival goer, but I knew her camera pen was already recording. A few yards away, Dr. Sarah Lightfoot wheeled in a picnic basket that wasn't holding fried chicken. It was full of EPA water and soil testing kits. The first crack in Vicky's perfect day came quietly. At 11:02 a.m., Sarah began her family picnic at the edge of the subdivision's storm drain outflow. She filled small vials with water that had an oily sheen and a chemical tang sharp enough to make your eyes water. A federal obstruction charge was already guaranteed. Someone had poured fresh concrete over part of the wetlands overnight. Sarah photographed the wet cement, her latex gloves catching the sunlight. I kept my role simple. Stay visible, stay quiet. Let Vicky think I was here to negotiate. At noon, she took the stage at the festival gazebo. Microphones, speakers, a giant cardboard check for $300,000 propped against the railing. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice honey-sweet, "today I'm here to prove that good people can solve disagreements without tearing communities apart." The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. She turned toward me. "Mr. Thornfield, please join me." I walked up slowly, surveying the crowd. Parents holding babies, HOA members with crossed arms, news crews jockeying for position, federal agents blending into the audience in polo shirts and sunglasses. Vicky held out a hand and smiled. $300,000, Mr. Thornfield. Today. You walk away and these families keep their homes. I let the silence stretch, the hum of the microphone picking up the distant buzz of cicadas. "You know," I said, taking the mic, "my grandfather once told me, when someone steals your land, they're stealing your family's history." Vicky's smile froze. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the 1924 contract, yellowed and fragile, but still perfectly legible. "Under this federal railway easement," I continued, "every single house in Heritage Meadows, every fence post, every street light belongs to me. And as of right now, the United States government is here to enforce it." There was a ripple through the crowd, the kind of sound you hear right before a storm breaks. From the corner of my eye, I saw Marcus Webb signal to the U.S. Marshals. 3 agents moved in on Brad, who was standing near the barbecue tent. His smirk vanished as they cuffed him in front of the news cameras. Vicky's voice rose an octave. "This is harassment. This is a setup." She turned toward the agents, but they were already surrounding the gazebo. Marcus stepped up and read the charges aloud. Fraud, money laundering, environmental crimes, conspiracy to commit theft, 47 counts in total. I'd seen people try to bluff their way out of trouble before. But Vicky wasn't bluffing. She was unraveling. "This isn't over," she shouted, her pearls shaking against her collarbone. "You'll regret this." Her words were drowned out by the sound of Sarah's EPA team setting up portable fencing around the subdivision entrance, posting bright yellow federal crime scene, no entry signs. The festival didn't end so much as collapse. Families scattered toward their homes, some angry, some scared, some just confused. The bounce houses deflated. The smell of barbecue hung in the air like an unfinished promise, and the bunting flapped uselessly in the breeze. I stood there, my grandfather's contract. In one hand, watching the kingdom Vicky had built start to crumble around her feet. The festival grounds emptied faster than I'd ever seen in my life. One minute it was balloons and barbecue smoke, the next it was scattered trash and the distant thump of car doors slamming. The U.S. Marshals didn't waste time. They moved. Through Heritage Meadows with the efficiency of men and women who'd done this before, serving warrants, photographing documents, boxing up HOA records while federal evidence tags flapped in the Tennessee breeze. The real blow, though, came from Dr. Sarah Lightfoot. At 1:42 p.m., she took the stage, not with a smile, not with a speech, but with a voice that cut through the heat like cold steel. "The groundwater here is contaminated with chemicals that pose serious health risks, especially to children," she announced. "No one is to drink the water. No one is to let children play in the yards. Effective immediately, all residents must evacuate." You could feel the panic ripple through the crowd. Mothers clutched their kids. Fathers pulled out cell phones, calling relatives or hotels. People who had defended Vicky with every ounce of conviction were suddenly staring at the dirt under their feet like it was poison, because it was. Some turned on her instantly. I heard one man yell, "You told us it was safe." Another woman shouted, "My son's been sick for weeks." Vicky tried to talk over them, but her voice was cracking. "This is government overreach. They're lying to scare you." No one believed her now. By 3 p.m., federal trucks were lined up along the subdivision entrance, escorting residents to temporary housing. Motel rooms, community centers, church basements, anywhere safe. Ruby moved among the families, notepad in hand, getting names and stories. I saw her stop with Maria Santos, the young mother who'd shown her the forged notary on her deed. Maria hugged her daughters close as she spoke, eyes red but steady. "They said it was our forever home," she told Ruby. "Now it's a crime scene." In the middle of it all, Sheriff Mike Ashworth tried to assert control. He marched in with half a dozen deputies barking at the marshals about local jurisdiction and rights of the county. Marcus Webb didn't even blink. "Sheriff," he said, pulling a folded document from his jacket, "you're under arrest for accepting bribes and conspiring to obstruct a federal investigation." The look on Ashworth's face, pure disbelief, lasted only until the cuffs clicked. By sunset, the subdivision was unrecognizable. Banners torn down, streets blocked by federal barricades. Bounce houses deflated in the yards like the carcasses of giant, colorful animals. The sweet smell of funnel cake still lingered, but now it mixed with the sharper scent of wet concrete and diesel from government trucks. Standing on the sidewalk, I felt strange. Not victorious exactly, because the fight wasn't over, but lighter. The weight of months of lies and intimidation was shifting off my shoulders. Ruby joined me, tucking her notepad into her bag. "It's all coming apart now," she said. "They'll try to spin it in court, but the public's seen too much. There's no putting this genie back in the bottle." I nodded, watching a young boy carry a plastic tub of toys out to a waiting car. His mother caught my eye and gave me a small, tired smile. That moment mattered more than any headline Ruby could write, because for all the corruption we'd uncovered, for all the fraud, the money laundering, the environmental destruction, this fight had always been about people, and now those people knew the truth. The days after the festival felt like living inside a slow-moving hurricane. The worst of the storm had passed, but the air was still thick with debris. Legal filings, news stories, and the kind of gossip that moves through small towns faster than a summer thunderclap. By Monday morning, the arrests had made national headlines. HOA leaders, local officials charged in multi-million-dollar fraud and environmental crimes. The photos told the whole story. Vicky's perfect hair wilting in the heat as she was led to a federal van, Brad's face pale and slack as the cameras. Closed in, Sheriff Ashworth's badge turned in like a pawn ticket. But for me, the real work was just starting. Federal prosecutors moved fast. Marcus Webb called me into his Nashville office 2 days later, his desk buried under binders of evidence. "Zeke, I've seen plenty of white-collar crime, but this?" He shook his head. "We're talking racketeering, money laundering, environmental felonies, wire fraud, the works. This isn't going to be a trial, it's going to be a reckoning." And it was. Vicky's defense crumbled the moment the recordings of her bribery attempts hit the courtroom. Brad's ties to international shell companies tied him directly to the money laundering charges. Mike Ashworth's bribe ledger, sloppy, enough to list payments next to golf tee times, sealed his fate. Still, the legal victory was only half the battle. The other half was figuring out what to do with Heritage Meadows now that, by law, it belonged to me. I could have sold it off and walked away with more money than I'd ever dreamed of. But every time I thought about it, I remembered Maria Santos, holding her girls, or the little boy carrying his toy tub to the car on evacuation day. They hadn't built this mess, they'd just bought into it. So I did something most people didn't expect. I offered every resident a fair rent-to-own agreement. Clean titles, proper zoning, no HOA. We'd rebuild, not the houses, but the trust. About half took the offer. The rest chose to leave, taking buyouts from the compensation fund Marcus helped set up using assets seized from the Ashworths. While the lawyers and accountants worked through the property side, the EPA began restoring the parasite wetlands. Watching those first patches of green push through the churned-up mud was like seeing life return to something I'd thought was gone forever. Ruby didn't stop either. She turned the entire investigation into a Pulitzer-winning series for the Washington Post, and her documentary crew captured every step of the case. She made sure the story wasn't just about one subdivision in Tennessee. It was about every community in America where greed dressed itself up as progress. But not every day was a victory lap. Some of the former residents hated me for owning their homes, no matter how fair I tried to be. Old friendships in town were broken for good. The local paper's opinion section turned into a weekly war zone, and every so often, I'd find myself looking at the empty streets of the abandoned parts of Heritage Meadows, feeling the echo of what could have been if people had just done the right thing from the start. One evening, standing at the fence line where the subdivision met my pasture, Maria walked up with her daughters. They were carrying a box of cookies, still warm, smelling of cinnamon. "They're not from a store," she said with a small smile. "We baked them. I wanted to thank you for not giving up on us." Her girls handed me the box, giggling, when I pretended it was too heavy to carry. And in that moment, I realized something. The fight had started over land. But somewhere along the way, it had become about something much bigger. What kind of people we're willing to be when someone tries to take what's ours. 6 months later, Heritage Meadows didn't look anything like the picture-perfect subdivision that had once stood like a monument to Vicky's ambition. Yellow EPA tape fluttered in the wind where manicured lawns had been. Half the houses stood empty, their for-sale signs sun-faded and tilting. Others were stripped to the studs for environmental cleanup, their white siding peeled away like old wallpaper. The air smelled different now, cleaner, with hints of honeysuckle and fresh-turned earth where toxic soil had been removed. My cattle grazed again in places they hadn't touched in years. I like to think they knew something had been set right. The legal sentences came down hard. Vicky got 15 years in federal prison. Apparently, orange jumpsuits don't come with HOA badges. Brad took 20 for racketeering and money laundering. Sheriff Ashworth and 3 city council members got 5 apiece. And because of the wetlands violations, they all owed restitution that would take lifetimes to pay. But the real victory wasn't the prison time. It was the change. The Thornfield Foundation was born from the property windfall. $20 million earmarked for scholarships, legal aid clinics, and land stewardship programs. We opened the Martha Thornfield Memorial Library in town, a II's place where folks could get free advice on property rights, zoning laws, and environmental protections. 400 acres of my land became the Thornfield Wildlife Sanctuary. The EPA's restoration work had brought the salamanders back, and on quiet mornings you could hear frogs calling from the marsh like they'd been waiting for this moment for years. School groups came to walk the boardwalk trails, teachers pointing out the native plants and explaining how greed had almost erased them. Maria Santos became our community liaison. She helped organize the first Thornfield Heritage Festival, a real one this time, with bluegrass music, craft stalls, and barbecue served under a banner that read, "Community, not corruption." Her daughters sold lemonade for 50 cents a cup, and kept half the county in line with their big smiles and bossy charm. Ruby's documentary premiered on national television, winning her an Emmy and turning our fight into a case study for journalism schools. She still visits every year, and every time she does, she brings a batch of her blueberry muffins for me and a notepad, just in case the next HOA tries something. Danny's whistleblowing turned him into a reluctant hero. His testimony before Congress helped strengthen whistleblower protections nationwide. Now he runs an environmental restoration company, hiring workers who left construction jobs because they wouldn't cut corners. The ripple effects were bigger than any of us imagined. FBI investigations uncovered similar schemes in nearly 50 other communities. Billions in fraudulent developments were shut down. Federal laws changed. Now, large land transfers require additional verification to protect property owners from the kind of theft that almost took my family's history away. But for me, the change was quieter. Most mornings I still wake up before sunrise. I pour my coffee, lace up my boots, and walk the fence line. The mist hangs low over the pasture, cool on my face, smelling faintly of dew and honeysuckle. Some days I stop by Martha's grave before heading home, telling her about the new scholarship kids or the wetlands progress. I think she'd like knowing that what we fought for didn't just stay ours. It became something better for everyone. The fight had been long, ugly, and personal. There were days I thought about giving up, about taking the money and disappearing. But standing there now, with the land under my feet and the community stronger than it had been in decades, I knew the truth. When someone tries to steal your land, they're not just taking property. They're taking your family's story, your children's inheritance, and the trust of everyone who calls that place home. And the only way to stop them is to stand. So if you've got your own HOA nightmare, your own boundary fight, your own story of someone trying to take what's yours, don't let them. Document everything. Find your allies. Hold your ground. Because sometimes the biggest victory isn't in what you keep. It's in what you protect for the people who come after. You.